Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, this is Dave Baiocchi of Resonant Dealer Services, and you're listening to the New Warehouse Podcast. Here's today's safety tip. Chalk those wheels. It may seem cumbersome and unnecessary, but if your dock doors are not fitted with automatic ICC bar restraints, all of the drivers have got to chalk their wheels in order to ensure safety. Doesn't matter how much or how little the driver has to unload. Too many serious accidents and deaths happen every year in the gap between the dock and the trailer. So take some time, chalk the wheels, and save a life.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. Today's episode is our latest in the partnership with Material Handling Wholesaler for their July 2021 issue and cover story, which is entitled Unifying Your Dealership Data by ERP or SOP. So we're going to talk to Dave Baiocchi, who we've had on the show before and who is a longtime contributor to Material Handling Wholesaler as well, since he wrote this article. And we're going to dive a little bit into customer experience, and we're going to dive into something that I love, which is SOPs, standard operating procedures. I am a big nerd for SOPs, so I'm excited for this discussion. And if you are interested in reading the July 2021 cover story, just head to mhwmag.com. That's mhwmag.com. So, Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Definitely interested in digging into this topic. So Dave, you're from Resonant Dealer Services. You're the president over there. But why don't you give us a little bit, maybe for people that might have not listened to the episode that you've been on in the past, give us a little bit of a brief overview of your background and what it is you do over at Resonant Dealer Services.
Sure. Yes, I started in the material handling business nearly 40 years ago, and been all the way around dealerships and sales departments, service departments, parts, rental, administration. I've held positions on almost every front. And then back in 1999, I partnered with a group of 5 very capable individuals, and we bought a dealership in California, multiple branch dealership, and successfully ran that for 17 years. I retired from the dealership in 2016, and I had, during my time with the dealer, initiated some initiatives that really kind of moved the needle for us. And we're different in the way we approach the marketplace and the way we actually operated the business itself. And a lot of people wanted to figure out how we were doing those things. And so they asked me to replicate some of those initiatives for them. And that turned into what Resonant Dealer Services is today. I tend to isolate areas where we have cultural issues or customer service problems or things, practices and processes that we have that are not really as customer centric as we think they are. And we shine a light on that and isolate those issues, repair those issues, and then create a system of accountability so those things don't happen again. So that's I've been consulting with dealers across the country, regardless of brand affiliation. We all tend to follow the same model, and I help them, especially on the backside, the aftermarket side of the business.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think it's a great service that you're providing there, and it's really always great when someone can, recognize the things that they've done from their experiences that have driven the most improvement, and then be able to share that with others. So definitely a good thing that you're doing. And one of those things, and I believe you wrote about this in the June issue as well, was customer experience. And really, at the end of the day, especially as a dealer standpoint, customer retention is going to come from the experience that the customer is having there. So talk to us about the importance of customer experience that you kind of wrote about last month, and tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important.
Sure. Yeah, I started a series on talking about the customer experience. And customer experience, everything's got an acronym now, so it's the CX, and in every business, the CX is a point of focus, because it's not just a simple transaction. Every transaction is an emotional transaction. Are we leaving the customer with the vision of who we are and what we stand for and what we do and what our values are, and is the customer going to leave that experience he's had with us wanting to come back and do that again? And really, that is kind of the overarching goal of managing your CX, because especially in the material handling world, customers want more from us than they ever have before. It used to be that we were vendors and they were customers. So we were a supplier, and they were in the market for a forklift truck. We sold them a forklift, and then when it broke, they called us to fix it. Right. They don't want to do that anymore. We've evolved past the vendor and customer, and what customers really want now is a partner in the process of moving their material through their process. They want a partner. They want somebody to show them how it can be done quicker, better, faster, how it can be done more inexpensively, how they can heighten their customers' experience using data and help and consulting from us. So we're no longer just vendors. We are counselors. And that is a completely different model of business than we've been used to for years and years. Right. And what it requires really is that we have customer data, the data that we need to make this consulting experience valuable. It has to include things like service histories and maintenance records and OEM recalls, and all of that data needs to be transparent, and it needs to be visible to all of the customer-facing employees a dealership's going to have. A lot of times that's available, but is it visible? Because the customer wants the answer right now. Yeah. He don't want to wait on a report. He wants to know, when's the last time I had the transmission serviced on this truck, and we need to have that data at our fingertips. And many times we don't, because that relationship has changed. Our access and organization of data really has to change. Unfortunately, there's a lot of dealers behind the curve when it comes to both system capabilities and or digital training for our customer contact personnel. Well, do they have any dexterity at looking up what the customer needs and organizing it in a fashion that's quick and available and meaningful for the customer?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the ending point there is that, the technology, I think, needs to be there, but not just the technology, the training for people to be able to utilize that technology and get the right answers for the customer. And, I certainly have had experiences, just in the normal consumer world, going into shops or things of that nature, service companies, all these different things. And, there's certainly been the cases where, the people, they're trying to look up some information for you, and it's, we just upgraded our system and this thing is a pain and this and that, and it's kind of like, I get it, because I've certainly been through the system hiccups in my experience in the warehousing world and all those different things. But, I certainly see from the other side where certain customers are like, I don't care if you don't know how to use the system. I just want the answer, Right,
exactly.
I don't care.
And the very tools that we have spent so much money on to provide those answers can't be used by, they don't have the proper training to cull out of that system what they need. So the very thing that you bought to solve that problem actually created the problem.
Right. Yeah. And I think, the training is so important. And, I thought in the article that you wrote, one of the most interesting things that you mentioned is not necessarily the initial training, which I think is, one of the big points that we always kind of focus on, and especially with a new system and things like that. But you mentioned the technology and how there can be a loss of the knowledge and the training over time, especially as people, I guess, leave the company, retire, whatever the case may be, move on, and, that knowledge never really gets passed on, because in a sense it becomes sort of tribal knowledge, some areas. And I think you even talk about in there how, there may be some functionality or features in the system that are not used that often, and when they are, it's only maybe one or two people that are doing it, something of that nature. And that's how those things tend to get lost. So how do you ensure that the knowledge is retained and is, carried throughout the different, I guess, life cycles of employee longevity and rotation and things like that?
Yeah, well, I think we start with a bad premise, and the premise is that the people that remain know how to work the system, and they'll teach the new people coming in, except that's really a diminishing return. We have the best of intentions. All right. We buy a brand new ERP system with all these capabilities, and we send everybody to training, and that is an enormous cost. One of the input costs of doing this is getting everyone up to speed on the data, where it goes, what reports are generated, how that's going to help the customer, and everyone's trained. But that's just a snapshot in time, because it won't be a few weeks, but somebody will leave. And the responsibility for bringing the next person on board is not the vendor of the ERP system. The vendor is done. They're done with you. And this is kind of the model that they have, which is, we're going to sell you a system, we're going to train everybody on it, but then that kind of ends. And their offerings for ongoing training get kind of thin after the initial rollout of the system. They aren't as interested in that ongoing training as they were at the initial training. And quite frankly, they've got customers lined up here, people that are brand new that they need to train, and getting your people in is really difficult. That's been our experience through, actual dealership experience. You don't want to do that anyway, because that's expensive, and you don't want to send people back to some far-flung place to get computer training. So you figure your people, your existing people, will just train them. Except that they were trained by the person before them, and that person was trained by the person before them, and along the way we lose a lot of the secret handshakes, right? You hit the F5 key and this pops up. Well, nobody, after the very first training, nobody knew that. And they're going around the long way and doing it. Well, there's a lot of long way and wrong way that happens along that course. So we continue to buy the lie that our people already know. Well, what they know is really dubious, especially if they're second, third, and fourth generation employees. They've come down that trail, but they really haven't learned a lot along the way. Enough to get by, but not enough to be efficient or even know what the system can do if they only knew how to get there. And so that's why I think that we need to stop that practice. It really is not a best practice.
Right.
And move instead to establishing digital SOPs. SOPs are normally, reserved for things like sales training or service training or safety issues. We do this first, second, third, and fourth, but we don't really apply that to our digital world and to teaching people how to not only keyboard in data and make sure that it's accurate when it goes in, but then generate the reporting that really is going to help us move the needle with the customer. And, as an example, there's a lot of dealers that don't do enough to control the continuity of how that data enters the system. So you have branch A, and they're using this particular field for the assigned technician number. Right. But branch B uses it for a van number, and branch C uses it for a zip code. Well, before you know it, between your branches, your reporting is wildly different and unreadable after a while. So, number one, you start an SOP, a digital SOP, by gathering the stakeholders, all branches, and saying, unifying the way that data is going to go into your system. And there's, deciding what you want the report to look like. What is that report going to do for the customer? What data is needed on it? Now, how do we need to put the data in the system the same way so that everyone generates the same report and we can trust that data? That is really the first edge of creating an SOP that really changes the game for the dealership. Once you've got that stuff in place and you've decided what data, how you put it in, and what it's going to create, then you memorialize that process in writing. And then the most important part is to enforce that data is keyed in the same way and those reports are run the same way in every location without any workarounds. And that is the herding cats part of getting this done. But when people start to see that when we have a unified process and we're generating reports that are meaningful, how important it is, it just reinforces the importance of putting that data in the same way every time. Yeah. I want an SOP that for every digital process, so well written that a brand new employee on their first day could walk through those steps just using the written standard.
Oh, yeah.
That really is optimum. Well, I don't have to learn it from the last person. I learn it from the written standard because the written standard is what everyone has agreed to do. And when we move from just the last guy that was in that chair is going to tell you how to do it, to you're both going to sit over the top of this book, and maybe that person that's leaving that chair has departed from that process, but we're going to get back to it.
Yeah. That's
how you start to throw your hands around, how do we control this? And so SOPs are so very important for that process. And you start with your most critical, customer processes, the base data that you have on your customers, equipment records and PM schedules and work order data. And dispatch priority, and you use that team approach with all the stakeholders to format that SOP, and then you review and make changes on a global basis with buy-in from all of those existing stakeholders. And if you rigorously enforce that new standard, you're going to have an efficient system, and people are going to be able to get the data they need to make the decisions they need to make. So without it, it's a trail of diminishing returns, and I've seen it time and again.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And now a quick break to hear from our sponsor, Supply Chain Mavens. The past year has been full of fascinating and complex supply chain news. From shortages and forecasting challenges, to issues with COVID-19 test components, to the never-before-seen speed to market of the vaccine. In the past year, logistics and supply chain professionals like you have been nothing short of miracle workers. Supply Chain Mavens helps your team to continuously improve by developing tailored training solutions to enhance your team's competencies so they can successfully work across all aspects of supply chain. They offer exam preparation for the coveted APICS, certified in logistics, transportation, and distribution designation, as well as education in topics across the supply chain. Visit them at supplychainmavens.net/new warehouse to learn how they can help you advance your team's performance. That's supplychainmavens.net/new warehouse. Now back to the show. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the SOP is really the basis to making sure that your process, first, making sure that your process is correct, because as you're developing that SOP, you're going to go through every step, and you want to make sure that there's no gaps, and then ensuring that it's correct from the beginning, and then having it repeatable and standardized to do the same time every time. You're going to expect the same result every time. So the enforcement really that you mentioned in there as well is such a key as well. So, SOP certainly, I mentioned I'm a bit of an SOP nerd. I love a good SOP, but I'm curious, one of the things I think that you mentioned it kind of a little bit in there is that as you develop these SOPs, it becomes, there's a lot to it, right?
It's a big deal.
Yeah, and things like that. You end up getting multiple SOPs. So I'm curious, how do you develop a good SOP management system or like record keeping system to understand, I guess, if they're digital, how to find the correct SOP or which SOP relates to which process? How do you develop something like that?
Well, I think that the best way is to make the whatever process you're running, make the SOP part of a tutorial in that menu or in that section of the ERP system. It's got to be in the box. It's got to be on the screen. If you do that, you'll have a better chance of people self-regulating because the data is right there. They don't have to go to a book somewhere and try to look it up. That's number one. I think that a second way is you have to develop SOPs as an ongoing process. It's not a one and done. Current SOPs need to be reviewed every year with all the stakeholders, and it needs to be a regular it's like a quarterly staff meeting. This is a standing agenda item. It's not something that we just do once. But if we really want our brand new employee to be able to sit down and worm their way through it all by themselves, just using a standard, we've got to treat it like that. We got to treat it with some importance. And what I see people make the mistake of doing is having a committee or assigning a key employee for a special project, but he's also got his own job.
Right.
And no, if you're going to embark on changing your processes to include SOPs and have to write them from the ground up, that is going to take some dedication. You have to dedicate employees. Now, it could be a short term, when I say, a 1-year project, right? Or a 6-month project where that person is relieved of their regular duties and they have new marching orders, because this is not something that can be done on the side or as on an auxiliary basis, or, this is not something that you just attenuate to somebody's plan, but decide what SOPs you want and have them authored. I like to think about it in chapters. You've got rental SOPs, you've got used equipment SOPs, new equipment, and just walk through those one at a time. And I got to tell you, the vast majority of dealerships don't have these digital SOPs. And so their data is fragmented and their customer experience is suffering. So it takes a commitment, it takes planning, it takes execution, and it takes enforcement.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, having the discipline and the organization to get it together initially is such a painful, I think, thing to go through initially, but then the reduction in pain that you will feel over time is certainly worth the initial headache to get there. I mean, even from the warehouse side, we develop SOPs all the time, and bringing in new employees and, being able to have something to reference and, making sure every employee gets, the same message about all the different processes is very key to making sure that you're not missing anything and that things are operating efficiently. So definitely very important to be organized in that sense. So I'm curious, because a lot of businesses with, they're either they start small, and, maybe sometimes businesses start and they don't have much business experience, and, they're just trying to figure it out. And as they're figuring it out, I guess they sort of develop processes, but then they start to grow and they've never documented the processes. So for businesses, or even a business that's implementing a system, as you get farther down the path and you never kind of created these SOPs or documentation really, and it's all been kind of just certain people know how to do it and it's in their head. But where do you really start in that aspect of like starting that SOP journey, and where is the best place to really, I guess, begin when you're at that point?
What's going to affect your customer the most? Customer critical processes. Let's take a look at, in the service department, what's going to affect the customer most. Well, they call, they need a repair. They call the dispatcher, and does that dispatcher, what is the first question? What is the second question? What information do we gather? Then what do we do? How do we assess, where these customer critical moments are really where you should start the SOP journey. And the second thing is to have people, once again, dedicated to doing nothing but refining that process. And you can outsource that. I've done this for dealers, or you could assign it inside, but you've got to not have any distractions along the way, because once you set it in stone, that's the way people are going to do it. And you got to make sure that it's the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, you almost have to have an SOP on how to develop and store and organize your SOPs. Yeah, but I think that's a really good point of where to start on the, most critical customer focused tasks. Yeah,
customer contact. What's going to affect them the most? Those are the processes you start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So So, Dave, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking SOPs with me. I love SOPs. So, very interesting article as well, discussing them with a lot more information on mhwmag.com. So you can check it out there for the July 2021 cover story. So, Dave, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about Resonant Dealer Services, how can they do that?
Well, they can call me directly. It's 209-652-7511, or they can email me, and it's simply dave@resonantdealer.com. And you can also go to my website at www.resonantdealer.com as well, and you can contact me from there as well.
Okay, great. And we'll put that information on the newwarehouse.com as well, so you can find it easily there. So, Dave, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.